What is up, everybody? Welcome to our fourth Fivecast. My name is Andrew Callahan, and this is the Patreon exclusive Tuesday show, where I'm going to break down and react to some recent or upcoming video drops, share some secret privileged information about the inner workings of our Channel 5 operation, and beyond. Today, as I mentioned, I'm going to answer some fan questions. I uploaded a text post to Patreon a couple days ago, asking all of you kind supporters to drop 55 questions in the comments for me to answer in the upcoming broadcast. And today I've selected 5 of my favorite questions to answer on air. I should also note, if you have any other questions you want me to answer for the next Tuesday show, drop them on this post and I will pick my 5 favorites moving forward. I think this is going to be fun because I want to have more transparency with the Patreon inner circle, so on the occasion that anything pops off, whether positive or negative, I can get more comfortable just streamlining my direct and concise thoughts to my Patreon crowd, who obviously supports and cares about this whole thing that we're trying to do over here. But before we dive into the fan questions, I want to talk about a terrifying experience I had yesterday on YouTube with a new feature they have called the Inspiration Toolbar, which I saw appear in the Creator Studio. And that experience has now firmly positioned me as a somewhat anti-AI guy. So after my extensive interview last week with Jacob Hurwitz-Goodman discussing Zizians, rationalism, and the post-cyborg human reality that AI might create, I walked away somewhat concerned but not that upset. As an in-the-field journalist, I've always felt like my job couldn't actually be replaced by a robot. Not just on a human interaction level, but through the insights that you gain in the field when you genuinely put yourself in the shoes of another person or put yourself in a new uncomfortable environment. You are able to gain information and knowledge and insight that I feel like a robot just wouldn't be able to figure out from behind whatever computer it's operating from. One experience that comes to mind that a robot couldn't reproduce would be the tunnel taco experience in the Las Vegas tunnels when I ate a maple sausage taco with Andy and a homeless Native American man named Boxer. Boxer is the homie. I hope he's doing okay. I know that recently there was some pretty horrific floods in Las Vegas that sent water spilling through the tunnels, and that Boxer held on to a drainage pipe for 23 hours with water up to his neck and holding one cat in his left hand. The cat survived and so did he. So shout out to Boxer, I'm glad he survived. But anyways, the tunnel taco was cooked on the same unsanitary frying pan where Boxer and his wife Andy had cooked rats, possums, and raccoons. And I felt strongly after that a robot could never eat a tunnel taco or understand exactly what it's like to inhale that mixture of meth fumes and maple sausage taco smoke at the same time. So when I would hear people complain about AI, like graphic designers and script writers, I initially had something of like an implicit bias against their cause, which is mostly because most of the people lamenting about robots doing their job were doing relatively unskilled, kind of replaceable labor in the first place, and I figured might better serve society doing something more valuable, like installing HVAC or teaching kids how to read in Yazoo City, Mississippi. Again, I know that's wrong and that AI does have some negative side effects, but my knee-jerk reaction was that. My perception about AI began to change when social media platforms, particularly Instagram and YouTube Shorts, became inundated by this mindless AI voiceover, stock music-laden vertical video format that had flashy CapCut captions. And it was so obvious that this doom scroll fuel was not being edited by a human being. It seemed like it happened overnight, where the Instagram went for like a fun place with, prank channels and recycled riffraff vines, to this graveyard of robotic podcast rips that would begin with an AI male voiceover saying something like, "Watch what Lil Baby does when the jeweler charges him double for icebox jewelry," or "Joe Rogan left speechless when he heard this." It was obvious that there was a nefarious digital content profiteer somewhere in the ether that was throwing terabytes of downloaded podcast footage into like a machine that was in turn spitting out these horrible videos that were oversaturating the internet. And to make it worse, some of these phantom pages were actually sharing my shit every day, going from Talladega back in the day to the Minneapolis protests and then up until the San Francisco streets video, which was collecting a ton of revenue on the heels of my labor. On one hand, I thought it was kind of cool to have these random bot pages distributing my content to a new audience, but the broader implications of that were much more dark than just exposure. I think the manosphere influencers like Andrew Tate, Sneeko, Luke Belmar, Wes Watson, Fresh and Fit, those guys were probably the first to weaponize this vertical content machine thing, but I began to see it in every other format too. But those concerns I'm talking about relate to the distribution of original content, not the production of content itself. I still felt like that was safe from being replaced by robots. Going to the notion of copycats, though, and replacement, one of the hardest things to watch during 2023, my hiatus, was the widespread proliferation of Channel 5 inspired interview channels who, prior to me taking that leave of absence, were making, Mr. Beast style content or just doing generic comedic street interviews like What's Your Body Count. They weren't describing themselves as journalists or trying to combat mainstream media narratives, they were just producing interview content. And I think that the void that I left behind during that time created something like a miniature YouTube arms race to become the next Channel 5 all-gas variant. And I swear, I think it was mid-April 2023, I woke up one morning and there was 30 identical Vox Pop channels, the most notable conservative-leaning ones being Tyler Oliveira and Nick Shirley, both of whom I'm actually cool with. But the point is, it was mostly conservative-leaning all-gas variants. On the left, there was pretty much no successful copycats, but the ones who tried to copy me did so by actually dissing me before pretending to be me. Like this one fucking loser from Vermont who snuck into my green room during the Channel 5 live show, tried to take a picture, and then left after we asked super nicely, and then 6 months after that is now creating an all gas, no brakes copycat channel that opened just like this. Here's a look.
And look, you don't have a lot of options for gonzo journalism left. Louis Theroux, British. Andrew Callahan, sex pest. The crowd is piling into St. Albans City Hall.
I'm the Gouda guy, Mikey Cheese. Yeah.
I'm lactose intolerant.
Don't ever underestimate your abilities.
So I hate to hold grudges in general, but I'm gonna hold this one. Especially because that show was produced by the same guy who hosted our Q&A at the Burlington venue, who was set up by the promoter, and we had a great time with them both. So as much as I love Bernie Sanders and French Canadians, after this experience, I've officially sanctioned the state of Vermont for all future Channel 5 operations until we get an apology from that band of cool guys who threw dirt on my name. In general, it's a good thing to choose peace and to be humble. But we must learn to strike without fear when challenged without good reason. These phones and the internet are a great tool for connection. It's why we're here together right now. But it's also made the vindictive and cowardly feel emboldened to advance narratives and speak in ways they never would when staring into the eyes of a real one. Anyways, going back to AI and copycats. This new YouTube AI tool that I referenced called Inspiration is absolutely terrifying. For some context, YouTube says the Inspiration tab helps you to generate and brainstorm new ideas, titles, thumbnails, and outlines that can match your style with the assistance of AI tools. You can contextualize suggestions that seamlessly transform into realized projects for your next video. Long story short, the Inspiration tool actually tells you how to create and structure a Channel 5 or Tyler Oliveira video down to the structure, thumbnail, interview, angle, title, keywords, and hashtags, calculating exactly what the engagement will be if you structure a video a certain way. Engagement is a terrifying content word that justifies despicable acts under late-stage capitalism and refers to the revenue generated through eyeballs and human attention, which is ever dwindling in span. To be fair, I have done some small engagement-seeking things lately that I'm not very proud of, and I want to publicly call myself out on those things so I don't do them in the future, because I honestly didn't even realize I was doing them at the time. So, I have used trans people as keyframes in 3 different videos over the past 4 months. Election Day, anti-Elon rally, and Tesla boycott. I figured that because trans rights are such a hot button issue right now, these keyframes would get more people to click and in turn help to spread the core positive message of the video to a wider audience, which is technically true, but the core message of these videos isn't about trans people specifically. It's beat coverage of the election cycle, and trans people have been scapegoated, vilified, and used as political cannon fodder by the Trump campaign and the conservative propaganda machine. So I'm going to stop using them as keyframes forever unless the video specifically pertains to trans people, because they're human beings and not pawns for engagement. Anyways, I navigated to the Inspiration tab for the first time yesterday and was freaked out by what I saw. So there was 4 prompts. 1, exploring Maori culture in New Zealand, already did it. 2, comparing street life between Philly and Texas, the impact of immigration on American society, and the history of protests in America. Navigating to the Immigration tab, it laid out an entire video structure with YouTube's recommended titles for 5 different angles. The conservative angle being economic impacts, a double-edged sword. and the liberal angle being looking forward, a future of diversity and inclusion. The comparing street life in Philly and Texas thing was much funnier because it's just like, it's a bad idea for a video. Philly is a city. Texas has like 6 major cities in it with very different street lives. So a contrast piece seems sort of nonsensical. But either way, look at these keyframes they made, which the robot believes will create a lot of engagement. So on the first keyframe, we have a soft pretzel and cheesesteak on the left, and on the right, we have barbecue ribs and tacos. I assume the left is Philadelphia and the right is Texas. The second suggested keyframe was another contrast, but on the left, you had graffiti, and on the right, a freshly buffed brick wall. I'm assuming they're implying that Texas has law and order and no graffiti, which is not true. Houston, you got Next, D30, a lot of sick-ass graffiti. Austin, you got a bunch of the homies from TCK. Shout out to my boy JoJo. So obviously the inspiration feature is still in its beta form given these keyframes, but the broader implications here of the intellectual legwork being removed from the journalistic pursuit will absolutely lead to an army of mindless engagement seekers and YouTube journalists following these prompts for the sole purpose of making money through content. So folks, prepare for an era of total and utter content oversaturation. All right, moving on to some fan questions. Fan question number 1. One user asks, why haven't you been on the Joe Rogan Experience? Well, there could be 2 reasons for that. One, which is probably most likely, is that I'm not popular, famous, and influential enough to be on JRE. 2, could be related to a little green room spat that I had with Mr. Joe Rogan at his comedy club in Austin, Texas. So I'm not even a Joe Rogan hater, and I thought the mothership was actually pretty tight, especially how they lock your phones up in these magnetically sealed plastic sleeves when you enter the door. It definitely brings the anxiety levels down and makes it so comedians can push the envelope a bit more with their material, so it keeps comedy and experimentation alive without the fear of cancel culture. I was in Austin doing a couple different podcasts. The first podcast was Lex Friedman, and then the following day after that, I did the Matt and Shane Secret podcast. And unfortunately, Matt was out of town, but the homie Lemaire Lee, shout out to my boy, was there replacing Matt for that day. So that night after the podcast, Shane had a set at the Mothership Comedy Club. So he invited me, and in between sets, I'm chilling at the bar downstairs, and I'm getting like lightweight blown up by fans, which is fine. You know, I love fans. It was chill, but I was kind of like in a more relaxed headspace. I wanted to just doze off, listen to comedy, chill. And so I told Lemaire, I'm like, yo, can I go upstairs to the green room? I'm trying to, kick back and, lay low for a bit. He's like, man, I could take you there, but just so you know, Joe Rogan's a bit territorial about that green room. Like, so it's at your own risk. And I'm like, dude, no way, it's gonna be fine. Joe Rogan's reacted to like 7 of my videos because Jamie always plays them. So I'm like, it's gonna be chill. So me and Lemaire take the elevator up to the secret green room at the Mothership. There's 5 comedians in there, all in their mid-20s. Everybody recognizes me except for Joe Rogan. So everybody's dapping me up. Lemaire says, hey, Joe, it's my homie Andrew. Shake Joe Rogan's hand. I put some popcorn in the microwave, which I felt like was establishing myself as a member of the green room. And then I turn around and I see Joe Rogan like yelling at the security guard. And he's yelling, who let this fucking journalist in here? Kick him the fuck out. I can hear Joe saying this. I guess somebody told him that I was like a journalist, so he maybe thought that I was a Daily Beast reporter that had snaked my way into his safe space to ask him about ivermectin, which is a valid concern. So before I could even get kicked out, I was like, Lemaire, I gotta get out of here. And I walked down the stairs and went back into general population. So that could be why. I'm not sure if Joe Rogan thinks I'm like an asshole who was like trying to make my way up there to be like, dude, please have me on the podcast, bro. I'm such a big fan. But in reality, I just wanted to lay low and kick back. So if you're watching this, have me on. You've revolutionized the podcast space, and I'm down to come on anytime. One fan asks, what's the worst thing you've ever heard someone say? That's kind of a tough question. Do you mean in the field or behind the scenes? I'm gonna go behind the scenes. As far as like people saying insane shit, my nervous system is so oversaturated by ridiculous statements that I only actually react to genuine, touching statements that break through the fog of lunacy that encompasses so many outdoor political events. But I will say that the worst thing anybody on my team has ever said was during the People's Convoy of 2021. So if you remember, there were big protests in Ottawa, Canada, related to Justin Trudeau's government and their COVID vaccine mandates and transnational trade restrictions in the summer of, I think it was the winter of 2021. So in solidarity, some California patriots organized something called the Patriots Convoy that was supposed to go from Adelanto, California, which is pretty much LA, all the way across the country to Washington, D.C., to our nation's capital. If you ask me, it was actually just a way for January 6th rioter and Orange County Super Karen Lee Dundas to raise $700 grand. But still, they were off to DC with about 500 semi-trucks and one RV. They had no plan. There was no vaccine mandate in place, so there was no actual reason for a convoy to be happening, other than the fact that Biden was president and the election was quote unquote stolen. I was initially critical of the People's Convoy, but I think it was a good opportunity for like Facebook addicted, recently converted QAnon retirees to bond and check out new truck stops. So I was having a good time. And as the convoy got closer to DC, there was talk of having a second January 6th and actually pulling up to the Capitol 1,000 trucks deep. And people in the convoy were on go. So the night before what was supposed to be January 6th round 2, the convoy gathered about 45 minutes outside of DC in a small campground in the locale of Hagerstown, Maryland. So we went to bed that night, assuming that we'd wake up and actually go to the Capitol to ask Biden to, I guess, put Trump back in the White House. Kelly was there. We woke up the next morning and everybody was gathered around the central campground area. And some trucker took the podium and he said, "Hey guys, I regret to inform you that Lee Dundas is gone." So the lady who organized the entire People's Convoy rally and raised $700 grand miraculously disappeared the night before the big day. And we were informed by some trucker deputy in chief that we actually weren't going to the Capitol. We were going to do loops around the Beltway, which is like a remote freeway that encompasses the DMV in a circular formation. No, he said, "We've got some intel. There may be some Antifa infiltrators among us that are going to try to escalate things in a way that we don't want to happen." So this is very typical MAGA stuff here. So they get all stoked. They get to the point where they're almost about to do something crazy, Luigi style. Then they say, "Antifa is really riling people up. We got to calm down." So the plan was to do 45-mile-an-hour loops around the Beltway. So we're sitting there during the speech. Everyone's like kind of bummed. And our former camera guy, Evan, who was camera 2 back in the day, he just for some reason stands up and goes, "Why are we gonna drive so slow?"
Why are we going so slow?
Why? We went 45 miles per hour all the way across this country. Not to mention, we're not here just to go for a joyride. We're out here to make a statement. So doing 65, 70 mile an hour doesn't tell anybody nothing. So we're going slow, and we're taking 2 lanes up to let the world know we're here and we mean business.
And like the whole crowd just like turned on us. Like everybody whipped out their phone, started filming us, and they were like, "Slow? There's 1,000 truckers here, brother. 45 miles an hour is not slow." And that like totally blew our cover. Like everyone was asking us if we were, Antifa or Ukraine, Hunter Biden, everything under the sun. That kind of ruined the shoot. But yeah, that was probably the worst thing someone said on our team. Next question. Have you kept up with the White twins from Marin, and what are they up to? Their names are the Hoff twins, man, not just the White twins. There's plenty of White twins, probably from Marin too. Yeah, I mean, like a little bit. We went to an event with them called the Twins Gathering in Twinsburg, Ohio in 2023, which was pretty funny, and I've been tinkering around with the edits for years and trying to find like the right voice and narrative structure to make it work, but I haven't had much luck making a good video out of the footage.
Here's a small preview. It's time for double the romance and twice the excitement on Twin Hearts. Get ready to meet our dynamic duos, the identical twins who are ready to take the plunge into the world of love.
So we're the Hawk twins, and what we looking for in a female is we like strong women, independent.
You gotta be a twin, and you gotta be trying to win.
They gotta be strong women though at the end of the day too.
Prepare for twice the romance, twice the drama, and twice the love. Now here's our first contestants.
I'm Annalise. And I'm Adriana. And we're the Davila twins. We're from Ohio. We're Puerto Rican. I'm studying to be a teacher. And I'm studying criminal justice. Some people might say that I'm the good twin. And some people might say I'm the bad one. I'm really excited to meet the Hoff twins. I'm not really sure what to expect, but I'm excited. You're watching Twin Hearts. Hi.
Hi, ladies. Hello.
Do you guys fuck with the police?
Yes, my professors are former police officers. I just took a shooting course this time.
Day one. I mean, I ain't gonna lie, they were bad.
Them bitches is stuck up.
Not even necessarily stuck up, they've never
They
been
too
exposed.
square. Them bitches ain't never even had
They've
a
never
first
been
kiss.
exposed to nothing, and we've been out here, we've been exposed to everything under the sun.
They ain't never even been in a fight before.
No.
You know, it's like,
You gotta fight for our love.
Twins.
First thing I want to say is I fuck with the Hoff twins heavily. I think that they're hilarious. They have good musical ability. They're very charismatic, but I also think they're missing a key component which creates digital longevity in today's era, which is evolution. Back in the day, you can kind of be like a one-trick pony, like Chocolate Rain or Ray William Johnson, and kind of just be yourself all the time. But nowadays, to ride these constantly crashing waves of viral attention, you have to almost always change. Every year, you need like a new persona to keep people interested. And I feel the same way about Crip Mac. A lot of that is sad because these are very talented people who at one point had a lot going for them. And then people all of a sudden, as you'll see with Crip Mac and the Hoff twins, they just like lose interest because they want you to change. A good example is Boont Gang. If you guys are familiar with Boont Gang, he used to like steal shit and he would yell, "Boont Gang, no, I'm saying a whole lot of gang shit," and he'd run. And you know, he did it for a long time, but then people were like, "All right, bro, you've been doing this for like 5 years, you're 24 now, you gotta stop taking people's shit." So Boont Gang went to jail, found God, and has now had a second, career, a whole renaissance as a pro-Jesus spiritual God influencer. And I feel the same way about Crip Mac. If Crip Mac converted to Islam or, radical Christianity behind bars and he got out, no face tattoos, weighing like 200 pounds and like really banged for Jesus, like Jesus Christ, Crip Mac would have a second viral wave that I believe would be actually bigger than the first, but the evolution is key. And the Hoff twins are kind of doing the same stuff they were doing when we first filmed about, 5.5 years ago. What was my first time breaking character in the whole career? I'm gonna go ahead and say Burning Man 2019. So you can't film at Burning Man. You have to get permission from the Burning Man Council of Elders or something. And pretty much that's because a lot of people at Burning Man, not everybody, are very much part-time partiers. A lot of them are Silicon Valley billionaires and sometimes Saudi trillionaires who have very serious suit and tie, intense lives outside of Burning Man. And Burning Man for them is a regression to their non-professional, childlike state of wonder and excitement. They get to be somebody else. They have a new name on the playa. They have a new persona. They're not the CEO of Aetna Insurance or New York Life. They are Spyro from, the camp whatever. So I went into Burning Man not knowing what to make or what to do. I was with my then girlfriend Ciel, and we kind of masqueraded ourselves as psychedelic journalists because we wanted to get trip reports and talk to people about their craziest peyote or acid trip or whatever. So we'd go in there and we'd be like, "Hey, can we ask you about your craziest acid trip or whatever?" And then the first interview that we did at Burning Man was with a woman who said her name was Razma.
My name's Razma.
Her name was Alexa, but she changed her name to Razma because when people got Alexas, like the Amazon Alexas, and when they'd go, "Alexa," that apparently activated her nervous system, and so she had to change names to avoid that activation.
My first name, which I don't use anymore, was actually ruined by Amazon when people were shouting at their Alexas like, "Alexa, turn on Rolling Stone." It was actually activating my nervous system.
And so I asked her, I said, "What's the craziest trip that you've ever had?" And she said, "Well, one time I took a bunch of acid and I became multi-orgasmic." And I was like, "Okay, interesting."
Yes, yes, yes.
Thankfully, she didn't see me breaking character, but that was definitely a moment that tested my veneer of seriousness, or not seriousness, but sort of impish curiosity. That was that. I like this next question a lot. What are the biggest challenges that you faced when making a video? I thought about this question a lot. A lot of the difficulty has came with our international expansion. I think that early on, we wanted to be everywhere at the same time, Channel 5 worldwide. So we sent someone to Japan, New Zealand, Mexico, England, Israel, Lebanon, and somewhere else at the exact same time, without the budget or bandwidth to provide both the hands-on, teaching the satellite crews need to make a Channel 5 video, and the editing power to actually edit 6 different, batches of raw footage. But our worst experience on all fronts ever making a Channel 5 video was filming something called Israel-Hezbollah conflict. I wouldn't tell this story to the average non-Patreon subscriber, but this is kind of like the inner circle. I know you guys care about the development of this project that we're doing, so I'll break it all down. So last November, there was a great deal of commotion in northern Israel and southern Lebanon as well, where there was rocket fire being exchanged between the Israeli government and also Hezbollah, which is a organization of fundamentalist Shia Muslims who comprise a minority of the country, but a majority of certain areas like the Beirut suburb of Dahia and also certain cities in the south. We wanted to cover the conflict from as many angles as possible. So we started off by sending our Israeli correspondent Agat, who'd covered the Tel Aviv protests beforehand, to the border of Israel and Lebanon to cover the situation there. So we got her footage back and it was good. You know, it was interviews with the IDF commander and then also some civilians. But we felt like we wanted an alternate perspective, particularly a Lebanese perspective. So I posted an Instagram story and said, hey, who in Lebanon wants to film for Channel 5? We have a paid opportunity for you. Just email me at andrew@channel5.news. It took a couple days, but I got in touch with a journalist there in MYL who was paid very well, like a lot, to go into rubble zones in southern Lebanon and Beirut and talk to people who were on the ground. So we got his footage back, and it was very, very critical of Israel. It was mostly just a compilation of people talking about how this is all Israel's fault, and just a lot of people praising Hezbollah as well. So between the Israeli correspondent's footage and that, it felt like we had only extremely polarized angles. We had people who were very sympathetic to Hezbollah and also didn't like Israel. Then we had people in Israel who were like, everyone who hates us is a terrorist. So we wanted a professor to break shit down. And of course, we found Professor James Gelvin, my right-hand man, professor of Middle East Studies at UCLA. And he kind of provided a good middle ground to break down these dueling narratives and help us find the truth in both sides and also root out falsehoods as well. And then we realized after getting these three different angles, the professor, Agat's footage in Israel, and Weil's footage in Lebanon, we wanted to actually find somebody from Hezbollah to speak on this situation, because we talk about them so much with no representation. So my first thought was, all right, let's go to Lebanon, try to hire a fixer and find somebody who's in Hezbollah and talk to them. Then I remembered that a year before, when we announced that we were hiring new correspondents, somebody emailed me from the UK and said they wanted to work for Channel 5. They told me they'd interviewed a Hezbollah commander before. The guy's name was Antoine. He said he had a show out of the UK called Modern Insurgent, and that the Hezbollah commander interview footage, though it was owned by a satellite company called Atlas News, who sent them out to do it, was available for licensing. So I was like, yo man, we're not hiring anymore, but I want to license that footage from you. He was like, sure, sounds good. I just got to call my higher ups and figure out what the fee was, etc. So with the entire video edited featuring Gelvin, Agat, and Wael, I sat down at our headquarters for a week to wait for a figure from Antoine. It ended up actually taking 2 weeks, but finally, everything's in place. 3 correspondents, 1 professor, Hezbollah interview, all angles, and boom, we posted on YouTube. Within 30 minutes, YouTube takes it down and issues a supporting terrorism warning. Apparently, because we were centering Hezbollah and Lebanese voices as opposed to Israeli voices, we'd have to repost again, switching things around and adding disclaimers about condemning terrorism, etc., as if we don't condemn terrorism. So I make the re-edit, which took a week. I send it to Wael, our correspondent in Lebanon, and he freaks out. He says that referring to Hezbollah as terrorists in the video, which YouTube made us do, would in turn put him in danger. And also that he doesn't consent to being in the same video as an Israeli correspondent, and was furious that I didn't tell him that he'd be, paired with what he sees as the enemy. And he told me that he wouldn't sign a release form if we didn't make a ton of modifications to suit his narrative and protect his safety. His first demand was to have Channel 5 officially designate the Israeli government as a terrorist organization in the middle of the video, which effectively means our channel being removed. Bear in mind, my producer did inform his team beforehand that we'd also be shooting in Israel, and they'd already been paid out $5,000, but since we didn't have a release form, he was leveraging that signature to force us to make modifications. So I thought hard, and I countered and I said, okay, no problem. No release form, we're just gonna blur you out and change your voice. And he went into a tailspin after that, because obviously he wanted the clout and the exposure from the video. And that caused his demands to soften. Ultimately, I still did make a few concessions for Wael, but I had to put the video out a month late. Plus Agat, who had been very loyal as a correspondent, was kind of turning on us in a little miniature way. And I was going back with the YouTube team about terrorism. So, if you're a multinational news corporation, the lessons here are 1, get release forms signed before the wire goes out, and 2, If you're doing a Middle East special, do not throw Israeli and other Muslim Arab correspondents on the exact same project because I think they've got some problems. On that note, we have a new video coming out tomorrow. It's called the Israel Ceasefire Celebration, and thankfully it is a one correspondent video done by Agat, who was here in studio last week, so I don't have to worry about any release forms being withheld. I don't want to say too much more. Let's react to another video filmed in the Middle East. This is supposed to come out tomorrow on YouTube, but I'm still waiting on word back from YouTube moderators to figure out like what's appropriate for their platform. But yeah, it's another Middle Eastern video.
Am Israel Chai. Shabbat Shalom.
I am here to support the hostages coming back home.
It gives us hope seeing hostages actually being freed.
We want to seal the deal and see everybody back home.
Some of them have survived. Nobody knows yet.
Some of them could be dying as they're waiting to be freed.
My roommate is held captive and I don't know when the last time he saw daylight was.
We were waiting for them for more than 470 days. We want the war to end.
We are seek for peace. We don't seek for war. This is Israel.
We don't seek for war. This is Israel. Crazy. Anyways, I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this video because Americans, especially in my social spheres, are so like Palestine pilled. And I too believe in a two-state solution and Palestinian sovereignty. However, I think this video is extremely important, not only because we've been covering this conflict since October 7th and we want to see it through, but also because the situation on the ground in Israel is very divided, and some of that division is part of the reason that the war is continuing. A lot of people want to pretend like Israel doesn't exist, or it's like this one-note settler colonial state, but it's actually very complex. They have their own left, they have their own right, they have their own center. This video mostly features what I figured out later is actually the Israeli left. The idea of an Israeli left, to me as an American citizen, seeing this polarized protest movement, sounds crazy, because I'm like, well, every leftist I know is opposed to Israel. But in Israel, it seems like the leftists are very much like, stop the war, bring the hostages home at all costs. The center is like, the hostages are kind of important, but like, let's also eradicate Hamas and maybe have a two-state solution. And the right is like, expel all Palestinians. I don't even care about the hostages. They're a small price to pay. Let's get Hamas out of here, you know, whatever.
The first phase of the Israel-Hamas ceasefire is nearing completion. Hamas released the final group of living hostages.
Trump, I love you because you are number one in the world.
Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land, developing and creating thousands of jobs with something that will be magnificent.
I mean, dude, it would not be magnificent. And let me just say, as a hotel guest, that's like the worst fucking place to stay ever. Like, if you ever stay in a resort like in Hawaii or Jamaica, you can kind of feel the weird like settler colonial vibes through the sad expressions of receptionists. In Gaza, it would be 100 times worse. Can you fucking imagine a magnificent Riviera in Gaza City? Who the hell would stay there? I'm thinking from a Trumpian perspective. Can you imagine? Like, oh yeah, it sounds great. Is there a golf course? What's the security threat like? Jesus. It's the Trump plan.
Americans taking over Gaza, getting rid of the Gazans, and then rebuilding it a la Miami Beach.
The Riviera of the Middle East, this could be something that could be so bad, this could be so magnificent.
It's not going to happen. There's too much objection already. The idea was that the Palestinians, well, why don't they go to Jordan? Why don't they go to Egypt? Well, the Egyptians don't want Palestinians, the Jordanians don't want more Palestinians, so it's not going to happen.
To clarify, the Jordanians and other Arab countries don't want, more Palestinians because they don't, have solidarity with them. They don't want their trade relationships to be fucked up with America and the rest of the world. Israel is an avatar for Western interests in the Middle East. Obviously, most of you guys know that. So if any other countries were like, we want to take Palestinians, not only would that kind of create like micro-radical factions in their country, but Israel would have a grudge against them, which would like kind of fuck their bag up. Is there any Arab nations that are willing to accept Palestinians as refugees?
No.
None of the Arab states are going to take numbers of Palestinian refugees. They don't want that instability in their society.
Hamas is a terror organization.
It's not instability. I mean, there's plenty of unstable Arab societies. Look at the Arab Spring, that was like 12 or 13 years ago. Syria just went through a complete revolution and coup, so that's not really accurate.
And they're still in charge in Gaza.
All the radicals need to get out of there.
And the whole area should go through a complete renovation and big projects.
I am King Sharshar.
Sharshar המלך כולם מכירים. Sharshar המלך כולם אוהבים.
King Sharshar.
All right, for all of you liberals out there who say that Israelis are just white people who live in the Middle East, you can't tell me this guy's white. I mean, he is white in the sense, but this is...
שרשר המלך כולם אוהבים.
That fool's not from the Caucasus Mountains like we are, bro.
King Sharshar, you see? King Sharshar.
שרשר המלך עוזר לחיילים, שרשר המלך מפזר מזומנים.
0507-328-9.
That's my favorite part. He's like showing love to the wifey. You know, he's got the Android selfie of his lady right there. He's getting a little raspberry sorbet going on the left. You know, because like he wanted to make a baller video, but still like show respect to the missus. So shout out to Sharshar.
0507-328-999. I come special for you.
Is this your phone number?
What?
Was this your phone number?
Yes.
When I'm seeing it now, I think he wanted Trump to call him.
Is there a lot of guys like this in Israel?
I wish there were. If there were, like, this place would have been a much happier place, you know?
The 7th of October was a Holocaust. You do not understand it. You think that poor people in Gaza, so poor. No. The Hamas.
King Sharshar.
That's the transition that I'm most proud of in recent memory, because she was talking about like the vibe was kind of grim. And on the initial editing pass, I didn't find the video of that like, you know, Arizona biker looking Hamas hater guy, but I found it on the second pass, and he encompasses the somber vibes of an Israeli ceasefire celebration. And this is kind of the two genders of Israeli guys.
I am going all the soldiers.
What does Sharshar mean?
I think it's just a bunch of necklaces, because Sharshar is Sharsheret, it's a necklace. So I think King Sharshar is the king of necklaces.
Sharshar אוהב את כולם.
Agat, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it. Thanks for the work you've done so far, and thanks for heading out there and getting this footage. What's up with this thing of like people calling women lionesses? The first time I heard someone say lionesses was like around the January 6th era. And then I heard it in the Stop the Boats riots in the UK. And then now here. I think lioness is code for something. If you guys have any information about this, please email me.
It's a beautiful day!
We have a lot of hostages there too, so we're waiting for them too.
This is crazy.
So for those who don't know, what was going on in this video?
All right, so that day was the day of the second wave of hostages arriving.
Hamas freed 6 hostages from Gaza Saturday, the last living Israeli captives to be released under the first phase of the ceasefire.
Bro, imagine you're in a Hamas tunnel getting starved and beaten for like 350 days, and then you get flown home and the first guy you see is King Sharshar. I'd be like, bro, you gotta take me back to Gaza.
So when they arrived from Gaza to Israel, they had like this one spot where they met with their close families. And then from there, they arrived to the hospital directly. And just people from Israel just wanted to greet them, like welcome them with signs and stuff like that.
Averu Mengistu in Hamas captivity for more than 10 years.
Seems like this first guy you talked to was a dual citizen.
I live here in Israel, in Petach Tikva actually, so close by, but I'm from Montana, United States.
You know, this guy hates the stolen land conversation. He's like born in Montana, they're like, you're not from here, you're not Cheyenne. And he finally gets to Israel and they're like, you're not from there either. Someone take this guy to a justifiable homeland, ASAP.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So he's from the US and he lives there in Petach Tikva, which is like a small city. I have no idea why he lives there specifically, but there were all kinds of people just trying to welcome him.
It's kind of cool to see Ethiopians there too. There was a pretty amazing thing that happened as far as getting all of the Ethiopians to Israel that happened 25 years ago. And I know about this because my GF's family is Jewish. Half of them are like super pro-Israel, half of them don't really care that much. But apparently the Ethiopian Jews were under a lot of persecution by the Christian majority faction 25 years ago. And that Israel spearheaded this $1 billion operation to physically extract all the Ethiopian Jews and move them to Israel. So it's pretty cool to see them in this video.
Come the hostages.
We take care of each other. I am with you. Continue the fighting that all the hostages will come back.
So a few days later, you were able to sit down with Luis Har, an Argentinian man who was kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th.
Hi, Luis. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview with us.
And he's Argentinian.
He's Argentinian. Yeah, Nir Yitzhak was the kibbutz where his partner lives. He just came to visit her, and then they were abducted from there.
A lot of people might wonder, you know, why would somebody from Argentina live in Israel?
I asked him this. He didn't want to get into it, really, so I don't want to speak by his name, but there were a lot of Argentinian people that were kicked out from Argentina and forced to leave in some way or another back in the 70s.
On the basis of religion?
Yeah, on the basis of religion. Because they were
on the basis of religion, like the dirty war under Videla was like horrifying. I mean, that was like, I think it was a 5-year period in the early 70s where, of course, the U.S. had something to do with an authoritarian right-wing dictator coming to power in Argentina. And there was this conception then and now that like Jews and communists kind of like share some fundamental thought pattern, which I'm not sure, I don't think has any validity to it. But I mean, pretty much he was incarcerating all student activists during the Dirty War, and a lot of those people were Jews. I didn't even put it in because it was so dark, but like the Jews that he was putting in these concentration camps that were pretty much open-air prisons inside of Buenos Aires, dude, he was like forcing them to listen to, recorded Hitler speeches, making them walk on all fours and lick officers' boots and shit. He was putting gerbils and rats in their fucking orifices with tubes and shit. It was horrible. So there's a lot of reasons that people would have left Argentina to go elsewhere. It's interesting that the angle that gets left out of the Israel story, which I find very fascinating, is that a lot of people in Israel are Jewish people who are just seeking a comfortable place to live that was free of the constant revolving door and cycle of anti-Semitic actions and governmental behavior. Unfortunately, I kind of feel bad for them because the Jews that founded Israel, especially the ones in the 40s, weren't even particularly religious. The original Zionist movement, they were more secular Jews, and it was much more, from what I've read, of an economic thing. But now it's become a homeland for the Jewish people. So I kind of feel bad for a lot of the folks who fled places like Argentina to come to go to Israel to not have anti-Semitic attacks and hatred. Because they could have just came to America. It would have been much better, but now they're like in the crosshairs of another conflict. It wasn't mentioned here too, but when I was sitting down with Agat and her partner, their families were also Jews that were expelled from different parts of the Middle East and South America. So a large percentage of the Jewish population come from a lineage of people that were driven out of other countries. And I think that that's a very important reason why they feel so passionate about staying there.
Because they were Jews.
On October 7th, we were at Clara's house, my partner. And in the morning at 6:30, the airstrikes began. And then the alarm started to go off. So we thought, they're ruining another Saturday. We didn't take it seriously because we were already used to it. Then we told everyone to get into the safe room. And then we thought, we'll hear a boom, we'll wait for 10 minutes and go out. But it continued on and on. And it was nonstop. The sirens just wouldn't stop. Alarm after alarm after alarm. And then we turned on the TV and we saw that a white pickup truck entering the city of Stredot. With terrorists inside, shooting in all directions, everywhere. And a while after, we saw Netanyahu announcing that we were at war. And then we started to take it more seriously. And we also started to receive WhatsApp notifications from friends who were in the distress. Who had intruders break into their homes.
To get a lot of this footage, I had to go into these deep internet archives of October 7th footage, which is like not news broadcasts, but just raw footage. Dude, some of it is really, really fucked up. That's all I'm saying.
Shouting in Arabic, running around and smashing everything.
Imagine you're asleep and you fucking wake up and you hear this shit. Hell no, dude. Were these fools just like fried on amphetamines? I mean, I read some shit that was like, that said that 95% of the October 7th attackers had never left the Gaza Strip in their life. So imagine your homie wakes you up at 6 o'clock in the morning, gives you a paraglider machine, an AK-47, like a bunch of amphetamines, and is like, brother, it's time. That's a psychedelic experience. So I think some of the barbaric ecstasy that you're seeing is a result of confinement.
Suddenly, we started hearing gunfire outside and the sound of glass shattering in our home. They entered through the windows, and then Clara, who is a kindergarten teacher by profession, told us that we needed to stick close to each other on the floor in the corner of the room. And that's basically what saved us, because they shoot at the door. Then they started into the safe room, firing as they entered. So we started shouting at them not to shoot, and they stopped. Then they took us, they dragged us out brutally, pulled us out of the safe room. And when we were out of the safe room, when we could somehow lift our heads and see what was happening, we saw that the whole house was full of terrorists. They were moving around, breaking everything, running, shouting, and that's how they dragged us out of the house. And from there, they started moving towards the border, which is 3 kilometers away. On the way, there was a group of teenagers holding large hedge clippers, opening and closing them, making gestures at us as if they were going to kill us. They really wanted to lynch us. But the ones in the white pickup truck stopped, fired shots into the air, shouted, "Allah Akbar," and kept going. Suddenly, they stopped, pulled us out, and pushed us through a low gate. It was the entrance to a tunnel. It was incredibly difficult to get in there. We had to hold on to the walls to keep from falling. We couldn't see anything. It was complete darkness. The floor was covered in stones, sand, and plastic bags. I don't even know what was inside. And there was cables everywhere. And they kept pushing us forward. We were certain that was it, that we would left underground. Every door that opened, we thought it was the end, but no, we kept going. They started asking us if we were Jews. They shouted, "Jews, Jews," and we answered, "Argentinians, Argentinians, Messi." It didn't help much, but we tried. So we kept going. We were inside the tunnel for about 4 to 5 hours, constantly running. There were moments when the tunnel's height was about this low, so we had to crawl. Suddenly, they sat us down on the side and started taking us one by one. We had no idea where they were taking us. It was the last one. When it was my turn, I looked and they took me to the right. Then I saw a steep dirt wall with metal rods, like stairs. It was incredibly sharp, hard to grip. One hand, one foot. Another hand, another foot. Like slowly figuring out how to play with it, to hold on so I wouldn't fall. It wasn't easy. Those who couldn't make it were tied with a rope and pulled up, just like with their weapons. They piled them up. They tied them up together and lifted them that way. When we got up, we noticed that it was daylight. We were happy. The people on the streets acting as usual, as if nothing was happening. Kids were playing soccer. Children were coming out of school. From there, they put us into a car. The girls and I sat down in the back, and Fernando was in the front. And that's how we drove through the alleys. We had no idea where we were. Today I know that it was already Rafah, meaning that between the tunnels, we entered through Khan Yunis and exited in Rafah. They drove in circles, trying to confuse us, but we kept seeing the same buildings over and over again. Later on, we also started recognizing landmarks. Eventually, they brought us to a gate where there was a house. I mean, what looked like an unfinished house under construction, but it seemed like that. But when we got there and they took us up the stairs, we saw that the inside, it was a fully furnished home. They sat us down in what seemed like a men's lounge.
It's just so crazy to me, like, especially from a historical perspective when it comes to like October 7th shit, like just the vast variety of differences that people had in their experience. I think when people talk about Hamas, they look at it like it's one organization with a bunch of structure, but it's interesting to think that it's several different probably factions within the group that both have their different opinions about how the hostages should have been treated. It's also important to note too that this guy got really lucky with his conditions. From what I've seen, it seems like a bunch of people were tortured, starved, and so forth, but not him.
We spoke to each other in Spanish in order to be able to talk about them without them understanding. And then the first one we saw, we named him the boss of the house. And he was somehow trying to be nice with us. And he told us, "Don't stress, we kidnapped you to exchange you for prisoners in Israel jails." Then he turned around and said, "I will protect you." And we were really confused. We were wondering what he would protect us from. Why should he protect us? And then we realized he was protecting us from his own people. They were dangerous to us, always with their guns on us.
I mean, I'm never going to be one to defend any Hamas actions or anything like that, but as far as the attitude, it should make sense to somebody why there'd be hatred toward Israelis. Okay, assuming the average age of somebody who's in Hamas as a militant is, let's say 18 years old, 17, 18. That means that mathematically they don't even remember a time before the blockade went up in 2005. So most of these people have been indoctrinated and actually confined by a blockade that was imposed by Israel their entire life. They're not only trained to kind of mythologize the evil nature of an enemy across the border, but they physically can't even interact with them if they want to. So finally being able to look at someone in the face that you've been told your whole life is out to kill you and is like a demonic force, it's understandable why there would be hatred. It would take almost a generation of like deprogramming and communication and harmony for that to go away.
So much hatred in their eyes. They were completely barbaric. Somehow he was different. He tried to make us like him. He gave us water every day and made sure we had what we needed. And he also told us, if you need anything, come to me. I'll try to get anything or whatever you need. That's it. That's how our life in captivity began.
That's a pretty unusual experience, right?
Yeah. Most of the hostages are held in tunnels.
Well, they were being held in tunnels for the most part. We don't know exactly where, because if I knew where, of course the Israelis would have known where beforehand.
He stayed above the ground in a house. I know that some were kept that way also, but the majority were kept in tunnels or still there, yeah.
In the evening, they brought us a bun with a piece of canned meat. So we didn't ask questions. We just ate it. So that's how we were there for 2 or 3 days. And then suddenly they came and told us they were moving us to another house. So in the middle of the night, they took us one by one. But in that house, the living room where we sat was in the back, not in facing the street, because they were afraid that if people on the street heard us, the local population would realize there were hostages there, and they might try to lynch us or something. They wanted to keep us alive so they can get a better price for us.
So why do you think he was given preferential treatment? Him saying get a better price is fascinating to me because I'm just going to keep going. Treatment over the other hostages.
I think it was just random, to be honest, because you had different groups holding different hostages and each one of them just kind of did whatever they wanted. Like Luis said that the commander that held him wanted him to be safe, so the leverage when they negotiate the deal would be higher for him, because when they negotiate people that are alive, the price they get back, Hamas, is higher.
The unit that received us at that house, they were more, let's say, normal. One of them was somehow friendly. He spoke to us and helped us. And all of the rest, not at all. Only hatred in their eyes. So we saw quite a broad range of humanity, and we started adapting to life in captivity. How did we pass the time? Either sitting or lying down, doing nothing. Clara tried to keep us active with all sorts of activities in the place or playing games. We also played 7 boom, except the booms were coming from outside. But it helped us to pass the time.
Okay, what's 7 boom?
7 boom is just a game where you go, each double of 7, you just say boom.
It's like 7, 14,
yeah.
21, boom.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot about Israel from your correspondence. I know 3 words. Sheket.
Sheket?
Which I thought meant peace, but it actually means be quiet. I told my girl's family, I said, sheket. And they're like, what? And then I know.
That's rude.
Yala is like, what up? Or like, sounds good.
Yala is a lot of things, yeah.
And then I know terror, which is terror.
אלו תומכי טרור בפועל.
טרור?
Terror.
חיזבאללה זה ארגון טרור.
Terror. All right, my bad. We're getting off track. Let's go back to the interview.
So after 129 days there, suddenly the IDF arrives. We had no idea what was happening. I opened my eyes.
Yeah, IDF, maybe if you're rescuing somebody, dude, stop screaming. You're probably scaring the shit out of them. If I was rescuing the dude, I'd be like, yo, it's all good. They sound like they're in Hamas. Ah! Like, yo, that's my thing. If I'm ever in warfare, I'm gonna zip it.
And I see bullets flying everywhere. It's almost impossible to see anything. Someone grabbed my head, pushed it down, and whispered in my ear, Luis, it's the IDF. We are here to take you home. That was the moment I realized it was a commando unit and that I was in the safest hands in the world. And there they spoke over the radio on the communication device and said, "The diamonds are in our hands." That was the code. The signal to everyone that we were now in their hands and that we were beginning our journey back home. And that's it. We got on board and they flew us back to Israel. We arrived at Tel Hashom Hospital where the doctors were waiting for us. Then our families started arriving. We saw everyone. All the 5 of us who were kidnapped from the safe room hugged together, safe and free. We were taken from our homes, from our safe place. We need to end this. They all have to be brought back.
I understand the emphasis on bringing the hostages home, and I do feel bad for them. But I mean, unless the situations can change in Gaza, and unless the material conditions and the extreme disparity between Gazans and Israelis can change, there's going to be future hostages. It's not like the hostages coming back is going to resolve the problem. It's very short term. But I get that it is sad that there's people that are being held hostage. I mean, I want them to come home too. But the bigger picture is what resolution can be made to make it so this doesn't happen again. Because as far as I'm concerned, getting the hostages out is only step 1 of like step 500. At some point, the conflict is going to have to stop. It can't just perpetually go on every 5 years for an infinite time span. The one thing that confuses me about these Israeli perspectives that I'm seeing is why can't they understand why it happened? You don't have to be sympathetic to the attackers to understand why it happened. Gazans are under complete blockade, and it's been like that for 20 years. That means they can't leave almost under any circumstances. I know that it's a bit different, but I look at it as kind of similar to 9/11. I mean, when 9/11 happened, there was no understanding of why Al-Qaeda or Osama would have taken action like that. There was like a revert to hardcore patriotism and Islamophobia. But as time went on, and especially me getting older, learning about, American intervention in the Middle East and Arab world, I understand the forces at play that created that situation. Doesn't mean I justify it, but I can separate the atrocities of the action from the conditions that caused it, and those are important. Like when you look at the Haitian Revolution, and I'm not comparing that to October 7th. On the surface, it was barbaric. The slaves of the island rose up and they killed thousands upon thousands of white French slave owners. But in time, it's kind of viewed as a more noble cause. I don't think that's going to happen with Hamas and the situation with Israel, but it's important to zoom out from the interpersonal aspects of the violence and think about at large what it symbolizes and where it's going. Yo, what's up, guys? The situation in Israel is one of the... Oh, it's a ground news ad. I'm not going to make you guys watch this shit. This is a long-ass ground news ad. I love ground news. Blind spot. Dope-ass news aggregate.
Watered down idiot. Horrible things.
So this is my favorite guy in the whole interview. You're about to watch my favorite part of the whole interview right here, which is with this Israeli leftist guy.
Of course, Hamas did these horrible things, but we have to remember 2 things. Netanyahu and his government knew they are the enemy, but Netanyahu was feeding them with money from Qatar in cash so it won't be traced, strengthening Hamas. Netanyahu was trying either to buy quiet from Hamas by feeding him with money, but more thing, his plan was to avoid the 2-state solution, to avoid pressure on him to go to negotiation on the 2-state solution. He was making sure Hamas will be strong enough against the Palestinian Authority, so the Palestinians will stay split between the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Then he could say, hey, how can I go for a negotiation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic divide and conquer tactic, and this guy's interview really put it all into perspective. Also, this guy is an Israeli leftist, by the way, even though his shirt has the, bring the hostages home, which in America would be equated with like a more Trumpian right-wing perspective for some reason. He's an Israeli leftist who believes that Netanyahu is responsible for the creation of Hamas, which is pretty plausible. I'm not sure the validity of what he said about the Qatar funding.
So he did this thing to make sure he won't be pressured to go for a 2-state solution. It doesn't matter if this 2-state solution is something that needs to be done or not. But the way he did it, strengthening the biggest enemy against Israel, was his heinous doing, and we know the results.
I think it's important to clarify that the hostages weren't released as a result of like Israeli military might. It was a trade.
It was a trade.
So in exchange for these hostages, we had to pull out of areas in Gaza. We also had to give back thousands of terrorists that have killed Israeli citizens.
Israel is set to release more than 600 Palestinian prisoners.
זה כל ההבדל בין חיילת שנחטפה בפיג'מה, או תינוק בן 8 חודשים, לבין אסירה שמשתחררת כי דקרה נער בן 14 ברחוב.
It's a lot to pay, but it's worth it when you see these hostages land on the ground.
So a few dozen hostages were traded for 1,600 Palestinian prisoners being held in Israeli detention facilities.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
I don't understand why the government of Israel would want to go tit for tat on like prisoner swaps when, you know, the solution that's mutually beneficial is a two-state solution, and the prisoner trades aren't going to get anybody closer to that.
Something like that.
From what it seems like, even what we're seeing at this event, that has kind of created some controversy.
We feel there are elements in Israel who don't want it to go through, extremists and zealots who don't want to see this happening for their reasons.
There is a big fear that it will not get into its completed phase. There is a very big concern that the Prime Minister has a motivation to break the deal in order to stay in power, because some fraction in his coalitions are threatening that if the deal will be completed and we shall not return to war, they will withdraw from the coalition, and this way it will end his reign, his prime ministry era.
This man didn't just make a theoretical statement here. The day after this interview was conducted, his prediction about Netanyahu losing Orthodox support came true.
One of the most hardline ministers in Benjamin Netanyahu's hardline government is out.
So throughout the war, Netanyahu's majority coalition has had a 56% majority in the Israeli government, holding 67 out of 120 governmental seats. Within his coalition is a radical faction called Otzma Yehudit, or Jewish Power, who hold 7 of those seats.
On matters of religion and state, ultra-Orthodox coalition partners will move to end more liberal regulation of Jewish conversion.
If Jewish Power is stronger, they will be able to ask Netanyahu for more things. He will not have a choice, but give them whatever they ask.
So that faction, Jewish Power, believes in the total dissolution of all Palestinian territories.
You will make sure Netanyahu finally does something.
Views Netanyahu as kind of like a wimp. And on the day after the hostage trade and ceasefire deal went through, the radical faction's leader, Itamar Ben-Gvir, formally withdrew Otzma Yehudit from Netanyahu's coalition. You know why these guys are such bitch-made ass fools? Not only because they're like, you know, ethnic supremacists of any kind, but they also like, they exempt themselves from military service, bro. So they want the complete relinquishing of all Palestinian territories. And as you know, Israel has a mandatory draft when you're 18. But these guys, the ultra-Orthodox Jewish Power Otzma Yehudit dudes, they say they can't go to war because they have to spend more time studying the Torah for the greater benefit of humanity. So these guys are encouraging an all-out war, going away from peace, but they don't have to send their own kids into the battlefield. So man, these guys are the worst. It's crazy that even in a country far, far away, you have the majority coalition being pressured by a fringe element that have positioned themselves so pivotally in the metrics of it all, bringing the coalition's number of seats down from 67 to 60 out of 120, meaning that Netanyahu is literally 1 seat away from losing majority power, which puts a lot of Israelis on edge, especially given the fact that there are still many hostages being held in Gaza.
This phase is dealing only with 32 hostages. There are another 60 that are going to be left behind.
Fears are growing about what will happen next with the ceasefire.
My son is not in the first deal, and we are waiting, anxious to see who will be released next.
We're not 100% sure if they're alive or dead. We just really want everybody to come back home.
Because there are still 90 hostages, including my brother. Or and his wife, Einav, went to the Nova Music Festival. And a few minutes after, a group of terrorists arrived and started throwing grenades and sprayed his bomb shelter with bullets and even fired an RPG into it. He had to witness his wife being murdered in front of him.
According to Gvir, Jewish Power, and many of their associates, saving the hostages isn't as important as preventing the next October 7th attack, which they believe will happen if Israel continues to engage in lopsided trades with Hamas. Again, this paranoia isn't just theoretical. Back in the day, there used to be an Israeli soldier named Gilad Shalit, who was held by Hamas for something like 5 or 7 years. And ultimately, I believe that Israel traded over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners in exchange for that single hostage to come home. And one of those freed prisoners was Sinwar, who was the third in command of Hamas, who organized the October 7th attacks. So the logic of fundamentalists and some moderates is that it's better to continue the war and eradicate Hamas altogether than it is to go tit for tat with them on prisoner swaps, especially if it runs the risk of future terrorists being released. I think I'm going to cut that particular. I think my monologue is going a bit too long for the final cut here, so I'm showing you guys the exclusive cut. I'm going to change that shit when it really comes down to it. I think a lot of us hammered it in again.
עוד מחבלים שישתחררו ויחזרו לעשות, ואני מקווה מאוד שלא יודעת מה יקרה.
זה הכי גרוע שיכול להיות.
Professor Gelvin notes that this notion of terrorists being traded for hostages is likely propaganda, and that a huge number of released Palestinian prisoners weren't even convicted of a crime in the first place.
I mean, a lot of them were under administrative detention, that they hadn't had trial yet, so they can't be considered guilty if you're saying that, you're innocent until proven guilty because they haven't been tried. Some of them that are the most high profile of the people that are being held by the Israelis refuse to negotiate about. So that it's one of those things that the hostages are completely innocent, of course, but many of the political prisoners are innocent as well.
Several weeks after these interviews were filmed, on March 19th, 2025, Israel, not Hamas, broke the ceasefire agreement, bombing Gaza and killing 400 people in their homes.
Red Cross headquarters in Rafah has been hit.
Why the fuck is there a Channel 5 logo on that?
Red Cross headquarters
ceasefire. What the hell? Why the hell? Who the hell put the damn Channel 5 logo above the news live? Did they fucking do? Is someone? What is this? Some kind of prank? It doesn't even make any sense. You do this? What the shit? Bombing Gaza and killing 400 people in their homes.
Red Cross headquarters in Rafah has been hit by an Israeli airstrike.
They also struck the Beirut suburb of Dahya and southern Lebanon, breaking their ceasefire with Hezbollah, which we covered extensively several months ago.
Israel's military said it hit a drone storage facility in the area belonging to the Iran-backed armed group.
Additionally, they suspended all humanitarian aid, like food, medical supplies, and water, from entering Gaza.
The Prime Minister's office said the decision was taken because Hamas had refused to accept an American proposal.
This set the previously peaceful streets of Israel ablaze, as it was obvious that Netanyahu had caved to the pressure of his disenchanted Orthodox allies. According to Professor Gelvin, Israel is now preparing for the final stage of the war, which involves the deliberate creation of a famine in the hopes that between resource scarcity and weakened Hamas leadership, Gaza will destroy itself through infighting.
Now, what the Israelis are counting on is they're counting on non-Hamas warlords to be able to take control over certain areas within Gaza and keep Gaza sort of under bad governance on the one hand, but also keep Gazans occupied on their own turf battles within Gaza itself. There actually is a political science concept called warlordism. And it's the idea.
I found this part to be the most fascinating because I feel like warlordism as a political science concept that works every time is kind of crazy. Like, I mean, just mathematically, if you deprive a community or territory of resources, like if you pull out, like in the case of the United States, like if you just pull out all good schools and healthy food and community out of a place and you hyper police it, you can almost bank on the fact that gangs or regional factions will emerge to vie for control of what's left over after the resource scarcity has kind of taken hold of the area. And it just kind of, I was so fascinated by it, and it just made so much sense to me that I never thought that, I knew there was a direct pipeline between poverty and gangs. I'm not insane. But the fact that you can strategically elicit that poverty and bank on gang warfare taking people out is crazy.
Yeah, that, okay, when you remove the veneer of a state, when you remove the army, when you remove the police, all of a sudden what you're going to see is these local pockets that are going to emerge. And this is what happened in Syria, this is what happened in Yemen, this is what happened in Libya, this is what's going to happen in Gaza unless there is going to be some settlement. Now, the Israelis are saying we don't want any Palestinian control whatsoever of Gaza. Well, what are they going to end up with? They don't want Palestinian control, but certainly none of the Arab countries want to take control either.
So basically, Hamas is still in charge in Gaza, right?
In Gaza, Hamas is still in charge because this government didn't paint any kind of future for the day after. So it's a vacuum that it only carried on with the current situation. There is no real serious plan who will replace them, when they will replace them, what will be the mandate of any fraction that will take power after them.
A week after Israel broke the ceasefire, Gaza saw its first open, anti-Hamas protest in decades.
Out Hamas, out, they're chanting.
Shocking international media as the streets of Israel continued to shout.
In Gaza, hundreds of people have taken part in the largest anti-Hamas protest there since the start of the war with Israel.
But still, I bet you American leftists are still going to say that Israel somehow sent a bunch of crisis actors into Gaza to do this, man. In the absence of a concrete plan, the future of Gaza is still uncertain.
I want to trust Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump.
Oh yeah, you can trust President Trump. I want to trust President Trump. Yeah, good call. Trust that guy. He's going to make sure you guys are never going to get attacked at all. First step, build a sick-ass golf resort in Gaza. You guys are going to be totally fine. Stay there. Here's a voucher.
Do whatever they can in their power to make sure that no group of fanatic people will control this region.
At the end of them, Hamas should be replaced in power, if I understood it correctly, in Gaza. All the hostages should be released. Israel should be withdrawn from the Gaza Strip. That citizens that are now refugees spread all over should return to what used to be their home.
Hopefully Trump will be able to figure something out and other world leaders will step up and help Israel get everybody back home.
Hamas is still in power no matter what the Israelis say. Hamas is really in power.
I think Gelvin might be in power of the Gaza Strip as far as I'm concerned.
Israeli war aims has been to get rid of Hamas. They're not going to be able to do that. They're too integrated into the society of Gaza. They are the largest employer in Gaza. They're the administration of Gaza as well. So this is not something that's going to be, let's just get rid of Hamas and then we can put somebody else in. Palestinians are Palestinians. And that's why when everybody was saying how the Trump plan was so visionary, it's not. It's something that's going back to where things were. Palestinians are Palestinians. They're not generic Arabs. There's not 22 other places in the Arab world that can take them. They are Palestinians. And the Israelis even recognize that with the Oslo Accords, that the Palestinians comprise a nation. Now, a nation has a territory, and part of that territory is going to be Gaza. The other part of that territory is going to be the West Bank. So therefore, if we are going to have a solution to the question, it's going to have to be a two-state solution. It's going to have to be where Palestinians have a state of their own.
The problem is there's this big perception in Israel that Palestinians don't deserve a state because of what they did on October 7th. Very similar to the post-9/11 strategy of don't negotiate with terrorists. The idea is that if you reward violent direct action with an administrative gift, like, hey, here's the ability to have your own statehood, you're incentivizing the idea for the world that you can achieve desired means by killing civilians, which is typically how most countries are founded. Let's keep it 1,000. It's how the United States of America was founded. I can't think of a single place that wasn't founded that way except for maybe England. But yeah, just wanted to put that out there.
Do you believe in coexistence?
I do believe, but I don't know who is the partner on the other side right now. We have...
Let's back up. What'd she ask?
Do you believe in coexistence?
I do believe, but I don't know who is the partner on the other side right now.
You could say the same thing if you're Palestinian. Yeah, I support coexistence, but I'm not sure who the partner is on the other side right now. I think there's a big belief, especially among Gazans that I've spoken to, is that if you let Israel know there's a way for some kind of truce to be reached or a compromise to be met, that they're in turn going to take advantage of that and just try to get more and more out of you. The idea is that if you let up on the militancy, you're opening up increased risk, and out of revenge, they will just take whatever you got. So I think there would have to be a mutual agreement that isn't broken, where Israel says, we're going to give you a state and we're not going to interfere with what you got going on. We're not going to poison the well with Mossad security, officers to fuck your shit up.
Now, we have Arabs living in Israel and we coexist together peacefully. There's no reason why we can't do the same for the Gaza Strip or the West Bank. We need to make sure that another entity will enter this region in order to get to this stage, but it will take time for that to happen.
We have a long way to go with the Palestinians and to live two countries side by side.
This guy gets it. I like this guy.
It will happen someday. We are on the way. Now it's the beginning.
The end of the conflict is a two-state solution. That's the only way that the conflict is going to end. There is no military solution for this. That constantly going back into Gaza and constantly going back into the West Bank is not going to work for the Israelis. That fundamentally what they have to do is make peace with the Palestinian national movement.
I remember whenever we did our first interview around a year and a half ago, you said you felt like the main reason that Hamas started the conflict was more or less to keep the Palestinian question alive. And that it was never really about winning or losing a war, but rather, keeping the issue of Palestinian sovereignty from... I'm going to cut this particular ADR. I tried to make it, I obviously recorded the second part on a microphone. I tried to make it blend, but it sounds like it's two different things. And that it was never really about winning or losing a war, but rather, keeping the issue of Palestinian sovereignty from falling into obscurity like a lot of other things do.
Keep the question alive, make sure there's no compromise.
Do you feel like they were successful?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, right before October 7th, all we were talking about was Saudi Arabia and a possible peace deal with Israel. Now all we're talking...
That's all I was talking about, man. You couldn't get me to shut the hell up about it.
Talking about is Gaza. So they were absolutely capable of doing it. They absolutely did that. They achieved their war aim, which was to make it so that the Palestinian issue can no longer be ignored. And everybody and his brother is jumping on board to try to get some sort of peace deal going, try to figure out exactly how to resolve the issue. This is something that the Palestinians have done over and over and over again. I mean, basically, it looks like a tactical defeat, and it is a tactical defeat. But on the other hand, it is a strategic victory for the Palestinians. The Palestinian cause is now the front row problem in international relations. You have that, you have Ukraine, you have a couple of other ones. I mean, my last book, I wrote a chapter on whatever happened to the Israel-Palestine conflict was the name of the chapter. And this is what happened to the Israel-Palestine conflict.
All right, guys, there we go. Hope y'all enjoyed that little bit of a breakdown. I had some commentary, but not too much because I wanted to let you guys watch that for the first time. I think that I'm going to make a few changes to that cut before I post it on YouTube. I'm going to cut down some of the voiceover. I feel like I kind of go in a little bit too much and I say things twice and overstate. I'm going to add a little bit of music to the second part of the hostage interview, maybe add some more music to when I'm explaining the differences of political opinion within Netanyahu's coalition. And then I'm going to do a color pass. A color pass on what, you might ask? Dr. James Gelvin. I feel like some of the tight Z90 shots there are orange and yellow tinted. And Gelvin is not orange, unlike that bastard Trump. All right, yeah, that's that. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate all the patrons. That was 5cast number 4.